Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Very Cold Lasagna Podcast, your place for all your filthy casual takes on the world of sports for you casual fans out there like you and me. And this is episode number 277, and in this episode, we're continuing along in our 2025 NFL season team previews, and we're on part 6. This is actually episode number 6, and for all those Spanish speakers out there, and to correct my Spanish language from the last episode, and that was actually part 5. That was the last episode. So, yeah, I messed up my Spanish on the last one. But nonetheless, this is part 6. This is actually part 6 of our season team preview month, and we're staying down south. We're wrapping up our southern trip in our team preview month as we now focus towards the AFC South side of things in this episode. And yeah, we wrap up our trip down south in this episode of Very Cold Lasagna in our team preview month. So yeah, in case you haven't seen any of the other NFL season team preview month episodes, we've covered 5 divisions already. So that means I'd say about 20 teams already. So sorry, my math is so off, but nonetheless, we've already covered the NFC West, the AFC West, the AFC North, the NFC North, and the NFC South. So that's 5 divisions already. So that's 20 teams, and we're about to cover 4 more teams in the AFC South. So we're about more than 3/4 of the way there. And we just, after this, we're down to the elite final 8 in the next 2 episodes. So yeah, we're getting right down to the wire with our 2025 NFL season team preview month. And boom, that'll be that. But thank you for joining me along this journey, along this month of July, zooming right through fast. And in case you missed any of those episodes, any of our team preview month episodes, make sure after you listen to this episode, make sure you watch it back on YouTube or listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, follow the show on social media at Very Cold Lasagna, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram. So with that being said, let's get right into the show. And let's get right into part 6 of our 2025 NFL season team preview month. Training camp is officially underway, and the only update I have when it comes to training camp is, well, there's a bunch of holdouts from a lot of second round rookies, and that's not particularly a good thing. And you never want holdouts from these second round rookies. And I'm surprised it's the second round rookies that want money, a lot of money. Normally it's first round draft picks that want a lot of money, but that's not the case this time around, other than if you're Shamar Stewart, who continues to hold out. But it's actually second round rookies that continue to hold out. So that's a pretty interesting development. So keep an eye on that as we head towards training camp and in the preseason. We'll see how things pan out. And for 49ers fans out there, this is probably not the news that you want to hear. And yeah, we got another dramatic situation. As if you thought that, well, we're going to have finally a drama-free offseason. No. Somewhere along the way, earlier this week, we have contract drama once again. Juwan Jennings, our third man turned top man receiver for now, he wants an extension. He wants a contract extension. I don't know how much he wants for, but why now? Why now does Juwan Jennings all of a sudden decide, oh, I want some money. I want some money since I'm in the final year of my deal. I want to get extended. Why did he not go ask John Lynch for that, like, a couple months ago when everyone else, Brock Purdy, George Kittle, Fred Warner, were getting their extensions done? Why, right on the cusp of training camp, did you not ask for that? Huh? Why all of a sudden do you want to do that? You're affecting the team. And if he continues to, apparently what he's going to do is go to training camp and maybe possibly hold in. So basically not practice at training camp. Then the receiver room is pretty fucked. No Brandon Ayuk for who knows how long to start the season. And yeah, you got a lot of unproven receivers. So it's a pretty dicey situation once again for my San Francisco 49ers. So yeah, pretty fucked and pretty stupid of Juwan Jennings. So enough of the training camp updates. Let's get into what we came for, and that is looking at the season ahead for the 4 teams in the AFC South. Starting with the team with the worst overall record in the NFL and the team that had all the cards in the NFL draft this past April, and that was the Tennessee Titans. So last year, they had a pretty significant offseason. They changed things around, but last year's significant changes didn't really translate into a watchable on-field product. It was plagued with a lot of bad quarterback play from second-year quarterback Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, as the Titans' first year of their actual rebuild under new head coach Brian Callahan, who was replacing Mike Vrabel. It pretty much disappointed. Yeah, all of these new changes, this new roster construction, it didn't pan out. So they go 3-14, and yeah, not exactly a lot of silver linings. The only silver lining was a solid to good defense. So yeah, the good thing about the Tennessee Titans was that, again, they held all the cards in the NFL draft. They had the number 1 overall pick for a team that was rebuilding. So looking at some of the things the Titans had to address this past offseason was, well, going back to that number 1 overall pick that I mentioned 3 times now, was getting the franchise quarterback that they so desperately needed. Again, which was easy to do heading into this past April because, well, looking at that quarterback room with Will Levis, and, well, that was pretty much it because, well, there was no more Mason Rudolph, who left in free agency. So, yeah, they didn't really have much options. They didn't have much options at quarterback, and, well, they were holding all the cards. They were holding all the cards and pretty much found their guy. Then some other needs that they had to address to help out their quarterback was retooling the interior offensive line, as they had a couple free agents over there, like starting guard Dylan Raduns and center Corey Levin being free agents. And then they also had to find another starting receiver because they also had a free agent in Nick Westbrook-Akine, who had a solid season last year, but again, he was a pending free agent, and they didn't really have another top receiver in that bunch. So looking at some of the things that happened in the offseason, whether it was notable events, free agency, or the draft, but let's look at some of the notable events for the Tennessee Titans first. So they replaced their general manager, Ron Kaflon, with former Kansas City Chiefs assistant general manager Mike Borgonzi to replace Kaflon. Again, he has experience with a 2-time back-to-back Super Bowl champion and Borgonzi. So the Titans upgraded at that spot, but we'll see how that panned out. And they released a couple of people like edge rusher Harold Landry after they tried to trade him, but they couldn't. They also released corner Chidobe Awunze despite signing him to a 3-year deal, which was kind of odd. They gave him that big fat 3-year deal. But in fairness, though, he was injury prone and is injury prone. So then again, why did they give him that 3-year big fat deal in the first place? They also managed to re-sign their center, Corey Levin. So they managed to keep him out of free agency, which was good. Some of the moves that they made in free agency, and they made, I'd say, a good amount of moves in free agency. The good thing about a rebuilding team like the Titans is that they didn't really lose too many people of note other than one of their key needs in Nick Westbrook-Akine, which was kind of a bummer. But looking at some of their additions, they upgraded in the offensive line and Dan Moore, although it was a overpay in my opinion, and Kevin Zeitler. They also added a linebacker in Cody Barton, and that was, I feel like, was a steal for the Titans. They also added some help at edge rusher in Draymond Jones from Seattle, and also coming over from the Seahawks was receiver Tyler Lockett, who got released, and Van Jefferson from the Steelers. So looking at the draft, that was pretty much all eyes for the Tennessee Titans and pretty much the rest of the NFL, as they made the expected pick at quarterback and Cam Ward from Miami. So they pretty much got the quarterback that they wanted. They were not going to trade out the number 1 overall pick. And yeah, they settled on Ward. So the rest of the draft focused on their other primary needs, like getting another edge rusher in Olu Oladejo, and getting some more receiving help for Cam Ward, like Shamiri Dike and Alec Oyumoro Manor. Sorry for mispronouncing that. And yeah, just getting some more help for Cam Ward. So looking at this Titans squad, yeah, they pretty much got the quarterback they wanted. And I'd say they got him a nice supporting cast. Now, yeah, it was given that the Titans were going to get Ward, but it was also vital that they also provide him some help. So yeah, they got the likes of Tyler Lockett and Van Jefferson to provide him some veteran help. But it was also important to, of course, stay young. So they provided a nice balance in the draft that they can get all the help they needed for Calvin Ridley right away. Meanwhile, looking at the defense, which was a solid strength last season, yeah, they got some good additions to Cody Barton and Olu Oladejo, which should offset the release of Harold Landry in the pass rush and the rush defense. But as we go through camp and preseason, we'll figure out who will start alongside L'Jarius Sneed and, sort out the entirety of that front 4, front 7. Of course, there's still questions about the secondary, but, that's where training camp and preseason is for. So obviously your goal for the Tennessee Titans, they're like for Titans fans, like right now, don't think about playoffs too much. This is still a rebuilding squad. You still have a rookie quarterback in Cam Ward. I mean, and that's just my opinion, but you never know. So your goal for 2025 realistically is hope that this rookie provides fans reasons for optimism, because for the last, I'd say 2 seasons, there wasn't really much optimism for this team. So looking at some of the key games this season for a rebuilding team like the Titans, it's pretty much your first 3 games. You go on the road to take on Denver and their second-year quarterback, Bo Nix, to take on the Denver Broncos, which is a very a little bit of an enticing matchup between 2 young stud quarterbacks in Ward and Bo Nix. And then you have your first 2 home games in the next 2 weeks, which should be a couple of tests for Cam Ward, taking on the LA Rams and then taking on the Indianapolis Colts in a division matchup. So obviously, all eyes will point towards how Cam Ward is going to fare in his rookie year in the NFL. And Ward's going to have high expectations by at least showing fans and analysts his justification of being the first overall pick. So a lot of expectations are going to be surrounding this high draft pick for Ward, who I thought, looking at the snippets on social media, I thought he did pretty good to very good. So the other thing I'm hoping for the Titans is, who's going to emerge as that top running back to help out Cam Ward, because last season saw Tennessee possess one of the weaker rushing attacks because they had a disappointing committee of Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. And yeah, ever since Derrick Henry left to Baltimore, they haven't exactly addressed this position in not just last offseason, but this past offseason due to more glaring needs. But someone needs to emerge in training camp in preseason because it hasn't happened yet. So someone has to emerge to ease pressure off of Cam Ward and make his rookie year a little less pressure filled. So the Titans got the quarterback that they wanted in Cam Ward, but while the pros are different than college, the Titans did an ample job of rounding out his support system. There's still a lot of big holes on this team, but this team will keep the Titans. It's a team that's not yet going to contend, but they should be better than what they were last year and the year before. So moving on from the Tennessee Titans, the Titans in blue, we now go down to one of my favorite places in the NFL, and that's the land of all elite, to look at the all elite Tony Khan-filled Jacksonville Jaguars. And coming off the heels of all in, well, the Jaguars certainly haven't been all in as of late in the last 2 seasons, because looking back at their 2024 campaign, this team greatly underperformed, and they looked greatly unprepared most of the season, with Trevor Lawrence also really struggling, and just like the season before, he suffered multiple injuries as the Jaguars limped to another disappointing finish, and that not only did they limp to another disappointing finish filled with injuries at 4-13, but this also led to both Doug Peterson at head coach and later Trent Baalke at general manager. They got the shaft. They got fired. So you look at a Jaguars team that has to retool, not just on the roster, but at the head coach and general manager position. So your goal for 2025, if you're the Jaguars, is to try to get back in at least contention for the AFC South, which is still the second weakest division in the NFL, other than the NFC South, of course. So looking at some of the needs for the Jacksonville Jaguars going into this past offseason, they need to retool both the offensive and defensive lines, because the pass protection for Jacksonville has been very bad for Trevor. That he has gotten hurt the last 2 seasons. He's missed multiple games, while on the defensive side of things, they haven't been able to both pressure the quarterback nor stop the run on the other side of the trenches. So they needed ample amount of help on both sides of the ball in the trenches, especially on the offensive line, because if they wanted to have Trevor Lawrence play a full 17 games this upcoming season, then giving him ample protection was a must. They also need another corner opposite Tyson Campbell, because the pass defense was once again terrible last season, because that man had no help around him, and that needed to change. That was another top priority that Jacksonville had to address. And they need another receiver too to help Brian Thomas Jr., who emerged last season, because they don't have much else behind him. So that was another need that the Jacksonville had to address. So looking at some of the things that the Jaguars did this past offseason, whether it was a notable event, free agency, and the draft, but looking at some of the notable events first, obviously you had to address getting a new general manager and a new head coach. They hired at head coach Bucs offensive coordinator Liam Cohen as new head coach, but that came after firing general manager Trent Baalke, and as soon as Liam Cohen came on as head coach, they came after he shaded the Bucs and their contract extension offer. Yeah, I found that very, very interesting, to say the least. But going back to that Jaguars head coaching position, that search took a pretty long while than expected, because potential coaching candidates, as the days went on, a lot of people learned that they refused to work with Trent Baalke, and understandably so, because Trent Baalke has this weird track record of being hard to work with, and that forced Shahid Khan's hand. I have to get rid of this guy. I have to get rid of Trent Baalke. So they got rid of Trent Baalke, and they hired former Rams director of scout strategy, James Gladstone, as the new general manager. So hopefully Gladstone will be a positive change of pace given his long tenure with the LA Rams, and he did win a Super Bowl with the Rams, constructing that roster. So let's hope that, given the key events, the key moves that the Jaguars made this past offseason would pay off. So some of the other moves that happened for the Jaguars this past offseason, they traded away receiver Christian Kirk to their division rival Houston Texans. But I mean, it wasn't really too much of damage because it only cost them a 7th round pick. So not really too much damage for them. But in other weird moves that they made, they released tight end Evan Ingram. I'm not sure why they did that. And another casualty was Devin Duvernay also got released. So yeah, a lot of the receiving core was shafted. They got the boot, and I'm not sure why. So they didn't really lose anyone of note, but a lot of their moves came within free agency, like the additions per se. So they added some people within the offensive line. They, especially in the interior, like Patrick McCarry from Baltimore, center Robert Hainsey from the Bucks. So they at least addressed the interior offensive line. They also added some help in the secondary, like Jordan Lewis from Dallas, safety Eric Murray from Houston. They also got Trevor Lawrence, another receiver, in De'Ami Brown from Washington. But the draft was where they also did their dirty work in probably a major move that they made to go trade up and get one of the high notable and some say prestigious draft picks that people were really spotlighting in the draft process, and that was Travis Hunter from Colorado. Travis Hunter, I think I talked about him in that Filthy Casuals guide. He is a player that could play 2 positions. He played 2 positions in college, at receiver, and he could play cornerback. So he is this hybrid player in college, and it was going to be interesting to see how that was going to translate in the NFL. So they also got some more help at both the secondary and the offensive line, with corner Caleb Ransaw and guard William Millam. So the Jaguars didn't really have too many draft picks, but they addressed some of their needs in both free agency and the draft. So the defense, when I look at this Jaguars past offseason, it still has some holes, but at least it should be at least more manageable than the last 2 seasons in the land of all elite. So I say Lewis was a good pickup to play alongside Tyson Campbell. And now that they have Travis Hunter, dependent on his workload, and sources say from what I've read on news sites and tweets from Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport, he's mostly going to play on offense, I believe, from what I last read. It should make the passing defense better now with safeties Darnell Savage, who hopefully has a rebound season. But I think the Jaguars also kind of did enough to invest in the offensive line. They reinforced the interior with McCarry, Lewis, and Millam. However, I still think they could have added more depth on the exterior offensive line at left and right tackle, because the current crop just kind of doesn't hold up to protect Lawrence. So I feel like they should have added a little bit more depth at the tackle positions to challenge their current starters. So looking at some of the key games for the Jacksonville Jaguars this upcoming season, they begin it week 1 at Carolina, against Carolina, hosting them. And then they have a key divisional game against CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans. And then in week 5, they get a challenge against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. So those every other week games are kind of must win for the Jaguars, and see how they shape up with this new head coach and this new general manager regime. So some of the interesting questions that I have for this Jaguars team going into this upcoming campaign that starts in 2 months is, well, the thing with Travis Hunter. How are they going to manage his workload? Now, like I said, he's mainly going to be used on offense, and he was really good as a receiver. But if they also use him as a corner on occasions, then that's going to be interesting to watch. Like, how are the Jaguars going to manage that workload? So it could be a tough ask if either Travis Hunter or Liam Cohen they want to have him play both positions. So we'll see how that pans out. I think, like I said, if I remember what I saw via tweets from those insiders. They mainly want him to play receiver for now, but that remains to be seen. So let's see how it works out. And then obviously we have to look towards how Trevor Lawrence and whether or not he can stay healthy for the full 17 games this upcoming season. And I just hope and pray that offensive line and the investments on, especially in the interior, it pans out, it pays off, and just in general, the offensive line holds up this time around. So the Jaguars addressed their team needs. I thought it was solid enough. So let's see how it pans out. And they could have done a little bit more in order to compete with the Houston Texans. But let's see how it works out. Things can change when the actual season start. But again, as I was the previous season, I'm just a little bit concerned about Trevor Lawrence surviving this upcoming year because that offensive line and a secondary that still has some question marks around it, even with that new regime of Liam Cohen under that head coaching position. So moving on from the land of all elite, we head down to the horseshoe of the Indianapolis Colts. So the Colts hope to see Anthony Richardson last year take that leap. He was supposed to in his rookie year, 2 years prior, only for it to be another repeat of 2023. And the Colts, once again, they had to rely on another backup quarterback, this time being Joe Flacco, in the late stages of this last year, only to be eliminated from playoff contention before the last week of the season. And, well, once again, they were left with question marks around their first-round quarterback, who actually got benched for 2 games mid-season until, well, Joe Flacco was even a worse option under center by that point. So, yeah, the Colts, they finished their season 8-9, and, yeah, they pretty much had question marks on whether or not Anthony Richardson was really the guy that they drafted at 4th overall in 2023. So, for the Colts, the goal for this upcoming season is to once again try and get Anthony Richardson to finally break out as that long-term quarterback answer that they so desperately need to. Because if they didn't, well, it's another axe that to the Colts' long list of quarterbacks that they've so had since Andrew Luck retired. So anyway, looking at some of the needs that the Colts need to address this past offseason, they need to surround Zaire Franklin with more help at linebacker because he basically had no help behind or around him in the front 7. So Chris Ballard, the general manager, he should have gotten him some more quality help. So hopefully this past offseason would address that. They also need to upgrade at cornerback to help Kenny Moore because that pass defense struggled without him. So this is another area that Ballard needs to address. And then they also had to make a decision on safety Julian Blackmon because he was again solid and mostly healthy last season, but he was a free agent that the Colts had to make a decision on. Do they re-sign him or do they just let him go and walk to another team? So looking at some of the notable events for the Colts, whether it was in free agency, the draft, or other crazy events that happened around the team. And unfortunately, there was a sad event for the Colts, and that was the passing of their owner, Jim Irsay. Again, prayers to him and his family. It happened in late May. So the ownership was split among his 3 daughters. And again, it's a very unfortunate event that happened. So, yeah, that's the big thing that happened for the Indianapolis Colts. So looking at some of the moves that they made in free agency, they did lose 2 of their best offensive linemen in Will Fries at Ryan Kelly. So that's a major hit to their usually good offensive line. They also lost their edge rusher in Deo Odeyo Yingbo. Sorry for mispronouncing that. But they did at least get some help for the secondary. They got two good corners in Charvarius Ward from my 49ers and Corey Ballantyne from the Packers. And they added some help in the secondary in Cam Bynum at safety, replacing Kenny Moore, who still remains on the free agent market as we speak. And interestingly, they got a backup quarterback in Daniel Jones from Minnesota. So that is an interesting thing that happened when it comes to Anthony Richardson. So looking at the draft, the Colts, that's where they did more of their interesting work. And the Colts, with their first pick in the draft, they did a really good move in getting tight end Tyler Warren from Penn State because they were really lacking at that position. So sure, they have some really solid receivers, but getting a weapon in the middle, they were really lacking that. They continue to get some help in the defense, like adding people like Justin Wally from Minnesota at corner, defensive tackle Tim Smith from Alabama, and some other needs of addressing. So looking at this Colts offseason, adding into this upcoming season, the Colts got some reinforcements like Charvarius Ward. He gets an understandable change of scenery given what happened last season with the 49ers. But more importantly, he's a strong outside corner that gives Kenny Moore much needed support. Day 2 pick Justin Wally was a solid draft pick that can help the depth at that position. So I feel like, the Colts defense should be a lot better, but there's still some losses that that are kind of like the Colts should have done a little bit more to address. But speaking of addressing, I feel like half the offensive line was lost, and the Colts also didn't do much to address that. So, yeah, even if they had issues staying healthy, Will Fries and Ryan Kelly were the best offensive linemen that Colts had, and losing them was significant. They neglected the line pretty much all offseason until day 3 of the draft, selecting Jalen Travis. But the Colts really need to do more than that, with so many names yet to prove themselves at quality starters. Now, let's see how they do in training camp and the preseason, but I wish the Colts did more. And that was pretty much what I was trying to say with both of these takeaways from the offseason. Yeah, even if I struggled there. So looking at some of these games for the Colts this upcoming season, for a team like Indianapolis that still is yet to prove themselves in the AFC South, with, all the quarterback struggles that they've been having in the last several years, you point towards the first 3 games of the year, with their first 2 games being against the Miami Dolphins and the Denver Broncos. Then you have your first game on the road in a division rival in Tennessee against the Titans. So a lot to prove in these first 3 games of the year. So pointing towards, the things I question about this Colts team has to do towards the quarterback position, because when they made that move to sign Daniel Jones to the team, that point immediately towards, Anthony Richardson. There could be a quarterback competition on hand, and maybe there even is one as we speak. And my thing is, will Daniel Jones actually be able to unseat Anthony Richardson? Because when you look at what's been transpiring this current offseason, Anthony Richardson suffered yet another setback during OTAs with another shoulder injury that he had in his rookie year. The same issue with that shoulder. And his injury woes are really becoming a concern. So perhaps there is a bigger reason as to why Jones signed on. But Jones should be ready by training camp, as reports have stated from various insiders, whether it be local or national insiders. But training camp will provide a bigger picture on who will be starting week 1, whether it's Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. So the Colts have been in the same rut for multiple years now, and they've already facing questions about their top 5 pick, Anthony Richardson, in his year 3. So if Richardson can't stay healthy this year, Not only that, but he also can't keep his starting spot. Then it only speaks volumes on how much of a mistake the Colts once again made in picking a quarterback. Not just a quarterback, a top 5 quarterback in the draft 2 years ago. And honestly, it's a shame too, because Richardson had potential. The problem is he can't stay healthy. And if he can't stay healthy again, like I said, then it's just a major bummer. So moving on to our final team in our AFC South 2025 preview, to put a bow on things, we look at the multi-time AFC South champions that has run the division and pretty much dominated this weak division, is the Houston Texans. So this Texan squad, again, won a weak AFC South last year, but it came at the cost of a litany of injuries that had transpired throughout the season and a sophomore slump from CJ Stroud that eventually caved. It wasn't enough to overcome, resulting in another playoff exit in the divisional round at the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs. So sure, they went 10-7, matching their 2023 record when D'Amico Ryans came in, and then you had CJ Stroud come in, but unfortunately, they caved again in the divisional round this past season. So the goal for 2025, if you're the Houston Texans, was to not only make it to the playoffs, but finally, after their long existence in the franchise, make it to the AFC Championship game. So looking at some of the needs that the Texans had to do in order to finally make an AFC Championship game was fix the offensive line, because it was a major weakness as the season went along. CJ Stroud took a lot of sacks. And then they had to find a run-stopping defensive tackle in the draft because they also had difficulties stopping the run. And then they needed depth at linebacker and to the secondary, especially in the secondary, because they took some hits when people were getting injured in the middle of the season and then later on in the season. So looking at some of the things that happened for the Texans, whether it be in free agency, the draft, or some other things that happened to them, they made a couple trades. They traded for receiver Christian Kirk from the Jaguars, their division rival, but they didn't really lose anything when it comes to a return to them. They only traded away a 7th-round pick next year, so not really much of loss. But the more interesting thing that they did was trading away their left tackle, their best offensive lineman, Laramie Tunsil, and a 4th-round pick to Washington. I'm not sure why exactly they traded away their best left tackle in Tunsil. So why, for a team that needs to fix the offensive line, they traded away their left tackle, their best offensive lineman? That doesn't make sense to me. And I believe he also played all 17 games last year and in the playoffs. I don't know. But the offensive line trades didn't stop there. They traded away their guard, Kenyon Green, to the Philadelphia Eagles. But at least they got a player out of it. They got safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson, fresh off a Super Bowl, by the way, and a 2026 6th-round pick. But at least they got an offensive lineman. And they traded for guard Ed Ingram from the Minnesota Vikings. And they also re-signed corners Derek Stingley Jr. and Jalen Petir to 3-year extensions. So some of the other things that happened for the Houston Texans this past offseason, they lost Stephon Diggs and Robert Woods. But Woods was old, and Stephon Diggs, he was coming off a torn ACL, and he was on a 1-year deal anyway, coming off his trade from the Bills. So losing them, sure, it hurt the Texans in the receiving game, but they could have found a way to replace them anyway. And the Texans were tight on money too. So to offset the loss of Laramie Tunsil, they added left tackle Cam Robinson from Minnesota. They also tried to add some help at receiver in Justin Watson and Braxton Berrios. And then in the draft, they got a couple more receivers. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, and some more help at the offensive line. Ariente Urse. My pronunciation's terrible, so shut up. And then they got some more help in the secondary in Jalen Smith and Jalen Reed. They love their Jalen's in Houston. So I kind of like what the Texans did in stocking up the receiver core, because this is the set of moves that the Texans need to make in the offseason, because Diggs left for New England and Tank Dell, probably their other top receiver, is likely to still be out for the entire season with that significant leg injury, and that nasty leg injury he suffered late last year, the week before Christmas. So I like the drafting of Higgins and Noel more than the free agent additions of Watson and Berrios, because either way, Nico Collins and CJ Stroud, they'll be happy to get the needed help as long as they produce, and especially Nico Collins, because he's going to need a lot of help. But conversely, they made too many middling or irrelevant moves to address their biggest needs. This was another big need the Texans needed to attack, but for some reason they did the opposite and traded away Laramie Tunsil and Kenyon Green. Again, they tried to offset it by getting Cam Robinson, but still, you don't trade away your best left tackle, especially when your top need is the offensive line. I still don't get that. And I don't know, man. You're missing pieces. Like, there's just still too many missing pieces on this Texans offensive line for them to, truly keep CJ Stroud healthy, unless proven otherwise. Again, let's see how training camp and the preseason pan out for them. So looking at some of the key games for the Texans this upcoming season, you start out on the road playing against Matthew Stafford and the LA Rams, and then you point towards a division game 2 weeks later in Jacksonville against the Jaguars, and then you come back home for another division game against Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans. So, going back to Laramie Tunsil. Sure, they replaced him with Cam Robinson, but are they going to regret trading Laramie Tunsil away, especially with this offensive line? And then looking at that secondary, how will that perform with all these new additions? One of the most overlooked moves Houston made were the additions of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Elijah Husley, and Jalen Smith. The secondary behind Stingley Jr., Kamari Lassiter, Jalen Petier, and Jimmy Ward really lacked. But I think these additions can really go a long way as long as they gel together under D'Amico Ryans. So the AFC South is still a relatively weak division until the Titans and the Jaguars can really prove themselves to be viable challengers, even if they still have flaws of their own. Houston shouldn't have too much of an issue retaining the division, barring injuries, but finally getting over the divisional round hump is going to be the next question they again have to answer this season. So that's going to put a bow on our AFC South 2025 preview and part number 6 of our 2025 NFL season team preview month. So we covered the Houston Texans, the Tennessee Titans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Indianapolis Colts in this preview and in this part. So we wrapped up our time in these AFC South, and in the last 2 episodes of our NFL season preview month, we're going to head out east for the final 2 episodes of our NFL season team preview month. So get ready for that. And I'm hoping you all are enjoying these team previews as we get closer and closer to NFL football once again. So that's going to do it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I have been your host, Dylan Lasagna. Thank you for tuning into this episode number 277 of this icy yet spicy podcast for all your filthy casual takes on the world of sports for you casual fans out there like you and me. And until I see you when I see you in the next one, in the next episode for one of the last 2 of our filthy casual NFL season team previews, peace out.